You have been told your entire life that you need to find your passion. That somewhere out there exists a singular burning purpose waiting to be discovered. That once you find it, everything will align. You will feel fulfilled. You will wake up excited. But what if the entire premise is a lie? What if the people who taught you this, the self-help gurus, the motivational speakers, the career coaches, fundamentally misunderstood what meaning actually is? For centuries, a different culture held a radically different answer. The samurai warrior of feudal Japan did not search for passion. They did not wait for inspiration to strike. Instead, they practiced something far more powerful. They found meaning through the relentless pursuit of mastery in whatever craft they were given. This is not a story about following your dreams. This is a story about how the greatest minds in history built lives of deep meaning through something far more accessible and far more transformative. This is the real Ikigai.
Chapter 1: The Lie We Inherited. Somewhere in the last 50 years, Western culture made a bargain with itself. We decided that happiness could only be found through passion, that work was supposed to feel like play, that if your job did not ignite your soul, you were settling, you were wasting your potential, you were living someone else's life. This idea, which sounds almost virtuous in its ambition, has become a psychological prison for millions of people. Young people spend their 20s in a state of perpetual anxiety, convinced that they have not yet found their thing. Adults in their 30s and 40s experience waves of guilt and dissatisfaction because their careers, while stable and respectable, do not feel like callings. The psychological weight of this belief system is immense. Every job becomes a referendum on your value as a person. Every career change becomes a search for the missing piece. Every moment of routine work becomes evidence of failure.
But here is what Western culture failed to understand. The pursuit of passion as a prerequisite for meaning is a recent invention. For most of human history, across most cultures, this was not how people found purpose. They found it through something far older and far more reliable. In feudal Japan, a samurai warrior did not choose his path based on whether it excited him. He was born into a role, given a discipline, and handed a set of expectations. His father was a warrior. His grandfather was a warrior. His entire lineage was defined by service to a lord and mastery of combat. There was no space for personal preference. There was no room for the question, is this really my passion? And yet, the samurai produced some of the most meaningful, disciplined, and fulfilled lives in human history. How is this possible? Chapter 2: The Samurai and the Principle of Craft. To understand this, we need to travel back to the 16th century and meet a man named Miyamoto Musashi. Musashi was a legendary swordsman, but more importantly, he was a philosopher who spent his life documenting what he learned about mastery, discipline, and the nature of meaning itself. In his writings, particularly in a collection called The Book of Five Rings, Musashi never once spoke about passion or finding your purpose. Instead, he spoke constantly about something else: craft. Craft, in the way Musashi understood it, was not about what you made. It was about how you made it. It was about the quality you brought to every single action, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Musashi spent decades studying the sword. Not because he was passionate about swordsmanship in the way we understand passion today. He studied it because he was a warrior, because that was his role, and because mastery of his craft was non-negotiable. But through that obsessive pursuit of mastery in a single discipline, something happened. He did not find passion. Instead, he found something deeper. He found meaning. He found that the process itself, the endless refinement, the small improvements, the perfect execution of a technique he had practiced 10,000 times, became a source of profound satisfaction. The meaning was not separate from the work, it was embedded within it. This is a fundamental shift in how we can understand Ikigai. The word itself has been corrupted in the West into a Venn diagram about finding the intersection of what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what pays you. But this is not what Ikigai means. The original concept is far simpler and far more powerful. Ikigai literally means a reason for being. It is not found through introspection and soul-searching. It is built through daily practice, through the accumulation of small disciplines, through the commitment to mastery in whatever role you occupy. A samurai found his Ikigai not by asking himself what he was passionate about. He found it by asking, how can I become excellent at this? How can I master this craft so completely that my name becomes synonymous with quality?
Chapter 3. The Story of the Student. Let me tell you about a man named Kenji. He is not a samurai. He is a software engineer in modern Tokyo. And his story illustrates this principle better than any historical example could. Kenji spent his 20s doing exactly what he was told to do. He pursued his passion. He dreamed of creating the next great startup. He imagined himself as a visionary founder, disrupting an industry. He quit stable jobs, chased venture capital, and spent years in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction because the reality of building a company never matched the fantasy he had constructed in his mind.
At 32 years old, Kenji was burnt out, in debt, and utterly lost. He had followed the Western prescription for meaning perfectly, and it had failed him completely. Then, by accident, he read Musashi's writings. Specifically, he read a passage about how Musashi approached the sword. Do not seek to follow in the footsteps of the wise. Rather, seek what they sought. This simple sentence rewired something in Kenji's mind. He realized that he had spent a decade seeking the wrong thing. He had been chasing passion, chasing purpose, chasing the feeling of meaning. And in doing so, he had completely neglected something far more fundamental, the actual practice of his craft. Kenji decided to do something radical. He stopped searching for his passion. Instead, he took a stable engineering job at a company that was not glamorous, did not make headlines, and would not make him rich. And then, he committed himself to something else entirely, becoming the best engineer at that company. Not for external validation, not for status, but because mastery itself became the goal. He studied problems deeply. He refactored code no one asked him to refactor. He mentored junior engineers. He attended conferences not to network, but to understand the edges of his discipline. He practiced his craft with the same obsessive focus that Musashi brought to the sword. What happened next was not that Kenji suddenly felt passionate about his job. That is important to understand. He did not wake up one day overcome with excitement about debugging code. Instead, something more subtle and more profound occurred. The quality of his daily experience began to change. Days that had once felt like obligations began to feel like practice. Challenges that at once felt like threats began to feel like opportunities to refine his skills. And perhaps most importantly, he developed a deep sense of dignity about his work. He was no longer waiting for passion to strike. He was no longer measuring his satisfaction by whether his job felt like his true calling. He was simply becoming excellent at what he did, and that excellence itself became the source of meaning.
Chapter 4: The Mechanics of Meaning Through Craft. This transformation did not happen overnight, and it is important to understand why. In Japanese philosophy, there is a concept called kaizen, which means continuous improvement. But kaizen is not what Western business has made it into. It is not a productivity system or an efficiency framework. It is a spiritual practice rooted in the belief that perfection is impossible, but the pursuit of it is sacred. Every day, you approach your work with the understanding that you are slightly less skilled than you could be. There is always room for refinement. There is always a detail you missed. There is always a way to execute your craft with greater precision than you did yesterday.
This perspective is radically different from the passion-seeking model. When you seek passion, your satisfaction is conditional on feeling a certain way. When you pursue mastery through craft, your satisfaction comes from something far more stable. The knowledge that you executed with integrity, that you brought quality to your work, that you did not cut corners, that you honored the discipline you were attempting to master. This is why the samurai could find meaning in activities that often involved repetition, sometimes danger, and always high standards. It was never about loving what they did in an emotional sense. It was about respecting the craft enough to pursue mastery relentlessly. There is also a psychological element here that is often overlooked. When your primary goal is to find work that feels like passion, you are essentially asking your work to solve a problem that work cannot solve. The fundamental human need for meaning. Work is necessary, work is real, but work cannot provide identity, worth, or happiness on its own. These things come from a deeper place. However, when you shift your goal from find work I am passionate about to master the craft I have been given, you remove that impossible burden from your employment. Your job becomes what it actually is, a domain in which you can practice discipline, refinement, and excellence. And meaning emerges naturally from that practice, not from the emotional content of the work itself. The samurai understood this intuitively. A samurai who spent his life managing his lord's estate would find the same sense of meaning as a samurai who spent his life in combat. The domain was different, but the approach was identical. Pursue mastery with complete commitment. Perform your role with absolute integrity. Continuously refine your skill. And in doing so, you build a life of deep meaning, not despite the repetition and the discipline, but because of it. The structure itself becomes liberating. The constraints of your role become the container within which genuine excellence becomes possible.
Chapter 5: The Death of False Choosing. One of the cruelest gifts that modern culture has given us is unlimited choice. We are told that we can be anything we want. We can choose any career, any path, any identity. This sounds like freedom, and in some ways it is. but it is also a profound form of psychological torture. Because now, every choice we do not make becomes a potential regret. Every path we did not take becomes a road not traveled. Every career we did not pursue becomes evidence that we made the wrong decision.
The samurai did not have this problem. His path was chosen for him by birth, by circumstance, by the culture he was born into. He could not afford the luxury of wondering if he was doing the right thing or the wrong thing. He was a warrior. That was not a choice, that was a fact. And so, instead of wasting his energy on the question of whether he had chosen correctly, he could devote his entire attention to mastery within his given role. This is not a romantic notion. This is a practical reality that shaped some of the most disciplined, focused, and meaningful lives in human history.
Now, we cannot go back to a world without choice, and perhaps we should not want to. But we can learn something crucial from the samurai approach. There is profound power in accepting your constraints and choosing mastery within them, rather than perpetually searching for perfect circumstances. You may not love your job. You may have ended up in your current role for reasons that had nothing to do with passion. You may have made choices you regret. But the moment you accept that this is where you are and commit to mastery within this domain, something shifts. The energy you were spending on doubt and searching can now be redirected toward excellence. The meaning you were hoping to find through perfect alignment can now be built through consistent practice. This is the real Ikigai, not a feeling, not a destiny revealed, but a choice made every single day to bring your full attention and your highest standards to whatever role you occupy. This was true for the samurai in the 16th century, and it is still true for you, whether you are a software engineer, a teacher, a parent, a craftsperson, or a person in any other domain. The samurai did not search for meaning. They built it through discipline, through the pursuit of mastery, through the honor they brought to their craft. And this is a path that remains open to anyone willing to walk it.
Chapter 6. The Practice. If this resonates with you, you may be wondering what this actually looks like in practice. How do you shift from passion-seeking to craft mastery? It begins with a simple reorientation of attention. Instead of asking, "Do I love this?" or "Is this my true purpose?" you ask a different question. How can I become excellent at this? This is not resignation. It is not settling. It is a fundamental reframing that places the locus of meaning inside your control rather than outside it. The second practice is consistency. This is where most people fail. Mastery is not built through intense bursts of passion and effort. It is built through small, non-negotiable daily actions. The samurai trained every single day, not because they felt motivated, but because training was non-negotiable. They showed up in the dojo, they practiced their techniques, they meditated, they studied. Whether they felt inspired or exhausted or bored was irrelevant. The practice was the point. Similarly, if you are committed to mastery in your craft, you must identify the small daily actions that build skill and execute them regardless of how you feel. The third practice is refinement. This is where Kaizen becomes central. Every day you ask yourself, what did I do yesterday that I can do better today? This is not about grand improvements or revolutionary changes. It is about tiny refinements. A software engineer might refactor one small piece of code. A teacher might craft one lesson with greater care. A parent might practice one conversation with more patience and presence. These refinements, accumulated over months and years, become the architecture of mastery. And as you practice this refinement daily, you will notice something unexpected. The work itself begins to feel different, not because you suddenly love it, but because you are building something real. You are literally becoming better at what you do.
The final practice is what the samurai called shu-hari. This is the path of mastery. First, you protect and learn the fundamentals. Then you break and experiment with new forms. Then you transcend and create your own expression of the discipline. Most people never move past the first stage. They learn the basics and assume they have arrived. But the samurai understood that mastery is a lifelong journey. Even Musashi, one of the greatest swordsmen who ever lived, continued to study and refine his understanding until the day he died. This is the true meaning of Ikigai, not a destination you reach, but a direction you choose, a commitment to continuous deepening within your discipline.
Chapter 7. The Transformation. When you make this shift from passion-seeking to craft mastery, several things happen simultaneously. The first is that anxiety begins to dissolve. You are no longer waiting for the perfect career or the right inspiration to strike. You are no longer measuring yourself against an imaginary ideal version of your life. You are simply here, doing the work in front of you, bringing quality to it. This removes a layer of psychological noise that most people live with constantly. The second thing that happens is that your work becomes more efficient. When you stop looking for passion and start practicing mastery, you naturally become more focused. You are no longer distracted by the question of whether you should be doing something else. You can direct your full attention to what you are actually doing.
The third thing, and perhaps the most important, is that genuine satisfaction emerges. Not the temporary high of passion or inspiration, but something deeper and more stable. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that you executed with integrity, that you brought your best to what you did, that you did not cut corners, that you honored the discipline you are practicing. This is the true source of meaning in human life. Not the feeling of passion, not external validation, but the internal knowledge that you are living with discipline, with integrity, and with a commitment to excellence. This is what the samurai knew. This is what they built their entire culture around. And this is what has been lost in the modern obsession with finding your passion and pursuing your dreams. We have confused the feeling of excitement with the experience of meaning. We have mistaken novelty for purpose, and in doing so, we have made ourselves miserable. We have created millions of people who are constantly searching for something external to make their lives feel significant, when the real path to significance is internal and available right now.
Conclusion: the way forward. The samurai did not have the luxury of searching for passion, and perhaps that was their greatest gift. It forced them to find meaning in the only place it can actually be found, in the quality of their daily practice, in the commitment to mastery, in the discipline of showing up and refining their craft regardless of how they felt, in the honor they brought to their role. This is the real Ikigai, not a feeling, not a destiny, but a choice made every single day.
You do not need to wait for passion to strike. You do not need to find the perfect career or the right calling. You are exactly where you need to be. What you need to do is simple. Accept your current circumstances, identify the craft you can master within those circumstances, and commit yourself to excellence. Show up every day. Practice with intention, refine continuously, honor the discipline. This is the way of the samurai. This is the real Ikigai, and it is available to you right now in whatever role you occupy, in whatever life you have built. The only question is whether you are willing to walk this path.